Hello and welcome to another edition of The Reaction with me, Sarah Vine, and Andrew Pearce. Today we're going to be talking about what else. Sunak v Starmer, the ITV debate. Did it move your dial? And this terribly sad story about these babies who've been found abandoned in a London park. And last but not least, we're going to be talking about the D-Day anniversary.
So poignant.
Yes, very, very, very much the last.
Absolutely.
Of the veterans. Yes, Andrew, tell me what you've been up to. I mean...
Well, glued. I was glued.
Yeah.
I really was glued to it because these are still relatively new. 2010 was the first big TV debate. Remember when it was... I'm agreeing with Nick.
Yes.
It really did move the dial.
Yeah.
And I think it probably cost David Cameron his majority in the 2010 general election. But I think the debate was significant because I think it exposed what I've always suspected about Keir Starmer. He is a great, ponderous pudding.
He is. So I thought it was fascinating. I thought the format was very tricky.
Yeah.
It was incredibly fast, 45 seconds per answer, which
Too soon, too quick.
I think is a bit pacey, to be perfectly honest. But I thought Julie Etchingham did very well. She's very tight, isn't she? She was able to really hold them in. But what I thought was interesting, I don't know if it'll really change people's minds. And of course, Rishi's polls are terrible, or they were before this debate. We'll have to see what comes out afterwards. But I thought what was interesting was that I think a lot of people would have expected Rishi Sunak to be much less punchy and aggressive than he actually was. And he was like a little sort of bantamweight. He was really quick on his feet, wasn't he?
He's a Duracell bunny, isn't he?
Yeah, and he was landing a lot of punches. And every time, any kind of chink in Starmer's armour, and he was right in there.
And he had a message which he wanted to get through. And when you look at the front pages today, the Daily Mail, the Telegraph, the Times, he got it through because he said again and again, and I like the boxing analogy, Sarah, because he had Starmer on the ropes.
On the ropes, yeah.
Again and again, he whacked him with a Labour government, it's in its DNA, it will raise your taxes, a Labour government, you vote for Starmer, £2,000. Now, it took Starmer until the interval break, where clearly his officials, who were must have been raging at the screen, that he didn't even attempt to deny the charge in the first half of the programme. Too late now. That charge has stuck.
And I think the thing is that Starmer's response was, he was kind of testy, a little bit annoyed that Sunak was coming at him so hard, and he came across as, I think, as just a bit sort of kind of loyally, a bit sort of kind of uppity. He just didn't seem to be. He wasn't coming back at Sunak in a kind of efficient way, and then he kept sort of randomly mentioning Liz Truss.
Well, he mentioned Liz Truss in the first minute.
Yeah, he'd obviously been told to do that,
and it didn't resonate with the audience.
It didn't land at all. But it didn't land because he didn't mention it in the context of anything sensible.
Yeah, I know.
So the thing that I really thought was interesting was the difference in mental agility between the two men, which was that Sunak just was very much on that kind of opportunity to attack, and Starmer was always just a tiny bit slower, I think.
And when you consider that Starmer's background is
debating,
he's a lawyer. He rose to the highest level in the public sector, quite significant in his public sector, in that he was director of public prosecutions. So you would think he's used to the gladiatorial nature, he's used to being adversarial, but I've watched him in Prime Minister's Question Times for years. He's not very good. And there's no doubt that if you'd put your money on which one of these two is the polished lawyer, it was the man who's happiest with his nose in his spreadsheets, Rishi Sunak. He was agile, he was fast. There was no humour. We could have had a bit of humour, I think, from both of them.
No, he doesn't do that. But the other thing about him is he's so incredibly across his brief. I think one of the reasons he was successful in this debate is because he just knew more.
Yeah.
He just had more information at his sort of, not as if in his brain, just firing around, which he was able to use. He had quite a lot of kind of facts at his fingertips. He was really agile in that respect.
And I was looking at the body language. Did you notice Starmer couldn't really look at Rishi Sunak?
No.
I mean, clearly he hates him. There's clearly bad blood. I mean, often, sometimes they get on quite well. But he clearly can't stand him and couldn't look at him. But when Sunak was laying into him, he looked so pained.
Yes, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. He looked testy.
Yeah.
He looked like this is an annoying little man.
Yes.
Why is he standing in the way to me being Prime Minister, which is obviously what I need to be? Do you know what I mean? There was a sort of there was a kind of sense of a slight entitlement. I mean, so the moments that stood out for me were the question that actually Julie Etchingham asked, which is that, you know, if you had a seriously ill relative and you couldn't get them treated on the NHS, would you go private? And Rishi said yes, and Starmer said no. And I think that was a really clear ideological division.
Well, Starmer's answer, it was so convoluted, talking about how his wife works in the NHS. I had to wind it back because I thought, have I heard that correctly? I could not believe somebody who's earning £160,000 a year as leader of the opposition, who would have made quite a lot of money as a lawyer. We know he made a lot of money on the side as a lawyer, even when he was on Labour's front bench, thousands and thousands in addition to his MP salary a year. His wife's got a good job in the NHS. I couldn't believe he would actually be honest and say, well, I really would really not want to use private members. But if it was desperate and it was somebody I love in my family, of course I would.
Yeah.
The audience would have cheered him because it would have been honest.
Point of information to both of you. If you had loved ones on a long waiting list for surgery, would you, if you felt that that was the only way forward, use private healthcare? Rishi Sunak?
Yes.
Keir Starmer?
No.
Absolutely no if your loved one was on a waiting list for surgery?
No.
Thank you very much.
I don't use private health.
Okay.
I use the NHS. That's where my wife works, in one of the big hospitals. As I say, it runs through my DNA.
OK, thank you.
So
that shows how ideological he is.
Well, that's what I mean.
Because now this is the mask has slipped here.
Yeah.
We've seen it with his attack on private schools because he's going to put VAT on private schools. We've seen 2 schools now have announced they're closing down. Potentially 40,000 kids at least will go from the private sector into the state sector. They've got no answer about where those kids are going to go. But that is another sign of class envy and his ideology. He's much more left-wing than people
Well, exactly.
than he wants us to think.
And the thing is of course, if you opt out of the NHS or you opt out of the state school system, you still pay for those services. You're just not using them.
That's right.
So
you're freeing them up for others.
Exactly. So there's an argument to say that if you are able to pay for someone's care, then you're freeing up a bed for somebody who can't afford to pay. But he doesn't see that because in his head it's just private sector bad, public sector good.
Exactly. And you now begin to wonder. So when he became Labour leader, he became Labour leader on a false prospectus because he endorsed all 10 policy points of the Marxist Jeremy Corbyn, whose shadow cabinet he served in quite happily, by the way, for 3 or 4 years. And then he's ditched all those policies, but perhaps, actually, Sarah, he genuinely believed in them. Are we about to elect a wolf in sheep's clothing? I think we are. And that answer was so revealing.
And the other moment for me was the doctors' strike moment, which was very interesting because I think Starmer would have expected the audience to cheer the junior doctor strikes, but they didn't. Because when Sunak said, you know, one of the problems we've had with the NHS is that we've had all this industrial action and we're not going to give in to the junior doctors because they want 35%, and who can have 35%?
Well,
and the
he's
audience
not going to use taxpayers' money to fund that.
Yes, and the audience applauded. It was the first round of applause.
Yeah, and also of course we know there's going to be a strike the week before the election by the junior doctors in support of 35%. Now Labour have said they won't fund it, but are they condemning that strike? Are they saying to these junior doctors, don't dare do it? It's the most political strike so far. They know there's not a chance in a million years the Chancellor's going to agree.
Well, I mean,
a week before a general election, you can have a 35% pay rise. It's absurd.
But also, as we've written endlessly in the Daily Mail, the people who run the Junior Doctors Union are absolutely in the pockets of Labour, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. It's a very, very left-wing union. The Labour Party say, but the BMA is not affiliated to the Labour Party. It is full of Labour Party members and apparatchiks, and it's a really wicked strike, I think. But I think we are now seeing, that's why I think these TV debates are important, because the mask has slipped.
Yes, I think they do flush out weaknesses in these leaders. And I think that it's very. I personally think that people do vote in general elections a lot on personality, and I think that's why Nigel Farage's entry into this fray is quite interesting, because he is very different from both Starmer and Sunak. He's very charismatic. He's a sort of Boris Johnson style figure or a Trump style figure. He's one of those people who, is a cheeky chappy. He has this persona. He's got this sort of, slight Gene Hunt, fire up the Quattro kind of vibe going on, fags and the booze and all of that kind of stuff. And people like that. They identify with that because they can see the personality. And I think what we saw last night was that Rishi does have a bit of personality, actually, because a lot of people think that he doesn't because he fasts and he doesn't smoke and he obviously doesn't
drink,
party, and he wears his trousers a bit too short. He's a bit head boy. He's a bit of a head boy, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
Starmer has even less personality. So, I don't know. Farage. What do you think he'll be thinking?
Well, so Farage I have known for a very, very long time, and his return was a surprise because I think he realised when he put the statement out a couple of weeks ago saying, I'm not going to run for Parliament. He'd been flushed out by Tories. We thought very clever Rishi going for an early election. But he was taken aback by the hostile reaction that statement had because it implied that he thought the American election was more important than here. He's now on the campaign trail. He may well win this seat. It would be his 8th attempt. And he will have looked at that debate and thought, here are two men of a certain type not addressing the real issue, because Farage is going to make this an immigration referendum. It's going to be all about immigration from beginning to end. But actually, I thought Rishi was quite strong on immigration in the TV debate, making the point that what is Starmer going to do? He's going to put all the people who are in the camps on the streets, and pointing out when Starmer said, I'm going to tackle the gangs. Yes, Sunak pointed out the measures that the Tories brought in to enable the police and the authorities to tackle the gangs, Labour voted against it.
I know. I have to say, I thought that was one of his best moments because it was really sharp and really fast. And it was like, Starmer just walked into that one and Rishi smashed it in the back of the net.
But it's interesting to watch the Farage phenomenon because Reform UK is a one-man band. We saw that because I've written about this in the Mail today. He effectively toppled Richard Tice, the leader, in a coup because he could do that because Reform is not a political party like the Conservative Party.
Isn't it?
It's a business. Yeah, it's registered at Companies House. He's the largest shareholder, 53%. I'm the largest shareholder. Hello, I'll be leader. Do I need to consult the membership? Yeah. No, let's not bother. How many members have we got? I'm not going to tell you. Yeah. I own the party, so I'm going to be leader. So he told Richard Tice on Monday morning, I'm going to be leader, taking over. By the way, I'm announcing in 3 hours' time. That's not a way to run a democratic party.
I mean,
he's not a team player.
The thing is, I think anyone who thinks Farage is a team player is completely deluded. He's a single issue person.
He is.
But in the same way that he will be very, very good at pushing the immigration.
But look at the crowd he got out in Clacton. Which politician gets crowds out like that?
That's
Boris Johnson.
Yes, exactly. That's his. I mean, I wrote a piece today in the paper saying that reminds me a bit of when Boris Johnson came out for Leave. Yeah. All those years ago, 2016, he was dithering like Farage, and his intervention changed the Leave campaign from being a slightly sort of cranky group of a bit sort of weird Eurosceptics, including Dominic Cummings, to being an actual viable political force. And I think really did change the course of that referendum. And I think Farage has had a similar effect. The thing is, though, unlike the referendum, we have a first past the post system, and I don't think actually it will really result in many seats for Reform. Do you? I think it'll just split the Tory vote.
No, well, I've talked to quite a lot of people in Reform, and they are, of course, delighted that Nigel Farage is now the leader because he's got charisma, and Tice is a good guy, decent guy, but he is not charismatic. They don't think they're going to get many more than 3 or 4 seats.
Right.
That's going to be, and what they'll do in the process, of course, is rob seats from the Tories and potentially give Starmer a landslide. But that, in a way, could play to Rishi's strengths because he can say, right, you vote for Reform, you're going to get a Labour landslide. Who wants to give Starmer a landslide? So then he can do what he likes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Angela Rayner as Deputy Prime Minister with a landslide majority, a woman who admits this week she doesn't believe in us having an independent nuclear deterrent. Yeah, what?
I know. It is quite worrying, isn't it? Well, anyway, there are more to come. And I think, the other big question is what the Conservatives do if they do get pretty much wiped out. But that's for another time.
And of course, we will have a debate in a few days' time with the other party members. So Nigel Farage will be in that debate alongside Sir Ed Davey.
And that'll be very interesting, won't it?
And I hope they ask Sir Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat leader in the debate, why are you behaving like a complete child?
Yes.
Yet another silly, childish stunt this
week. Every teenager I know wants to vote for the Lib Dems. Do you know why? Because they're going to legalise cannabis.
Oh.
So someone should ask him about that. Anyway.
They certainly should.
We must move on.
Have you ever inhaled?
No, I'm not very good with drugs.
No.
Paracetamol's about my strongest thing.
I make a confession. I did once, and I fell asleep. Wasn't very successful.
I think that's the point of it, isn't it?
I don't really know.
Although, quite honestly,
the
in
only
London,
illegal drug I've ever
in
tried.
London these days, it's actually very hard to walk down a street without inhaling cannabis.
Particularly in certain parts
because it is
of London.
everywhere.
Yes. Very
Anyway.
smelly.
Never mind. That's a whole other issue.
So,
But quite interesting.
not a score draw, victory for Sunak, in my view.
I think so.
And I wouldn't
think
put
so.
it 51-49 as the YouGov poll. I got it about 56-44.
Yeah.
A decisive.
When is there a poll?
There was a snap poll last night.
Yes, I saw that, yes.
But the big poll will come this weekend when we see the impact Farage has made on the election. And it'll be a big impact.
Well, politics is not the only topic of the day. There's a very, very sad story, which I'm intrigued by, actually, about 3 babies who have the same parents, father and mother, who were found abandoned across a period of 7 years in a park in Newham in London. And the police are... The judge there's been a sort of judgment about. I mean, the police have released details of a couple of them. There's obviously something really sinister going on.
Yeah.
It's very odd.
Yeah.
What is it?
Same park, same borough, same parents because of the DNA. When I've read it first of all, I thought, is she in some form of
enslavement or something?
Is this a coercive relationship? And is she abandoning the child at the earliest opportunity? Look, she could, of course, have had them aborted.
Yeah, or adopted.
But she's putting them in a park and they're being rescued, thank God.
Is she leaving them there to protect them from whoever it is who's abusing her?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There there more other implications because it is a family of, we think it's an Afro-Caribbean family?
Yes, yeah.
And are there...
We don't know if there's any sort of what the relationship between the parents is what you're trying to say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Is it incestuous?
Is it a Fritzl situation?
Exactly. Fritzl being who kidnapped and his own daughter and impregnated her repeatedly
on several occasions.
Yeah.
Had many children, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's so frightening to think that if that is what is going on, that it's going on in the middle of London.
In a capital city.
In a capital city.
The richest cities in the world, one of those glamorous and famous. Newham, of course, is one of the most deprived boroughs in Europe. I used to live in Newham when I first came to it. Yes, it is. It's got a very large ethnic population. It's a larger ethnic population than white British. It's where the Gaza dispute is a huge issue. And the police have clearly put this information in the public domain because they want
for a reason. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're trying to flash something out,
yes,
aren't they?
They are. I think they must be because it's an odd thing to suddenly do. But it's just it's just the idea that sort of thing is going on in London and that the person involved hasn't been able to. I don't know. It's happening across a period of 7 years.
And
you'd have thought that they'd been able to get out and to say something to somebody.
Somebody must know them.
Yeah.
Somebody must know her. Somebody must observe, unless, of course, she is imprisoned in a cellar like Fritzl.
Yeah.
The judge involved in this case said it was important this information put in the public because she said, Judge Carol Atkinson, it's an issue of great public interest as babies are rarely abandoned in modern Britain. Certainly not 3 from the same parents in a space of 7 years.
Yeah.
What sort of health is she in mentally?
I don't know. They were all abandoned in very cold. In January, September. They were freezing cold when they were found. But anyway, it's I'm sure there's just you have that feeling that this is just the tip of an iceberg.
Yeah, because also the other thing is, what's involvement of social services got here?
Yeah.
Are they involved at all? Do they know the mother?
I think the children are fostered.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah, well, I think it's very disturbing.
So we'll have to keep an eye on that one. And finally, D-Day.
Oh, I'm going to be a bit of a name drop here because when I was at Buckingham Palace just 2 weeks ago.
Were you at Buckingham Palace 2 weeks ago?
I wasn't 2 weeks ago.
Were you?
And I was chatting to some veterans from D-Day.
Yes.
And I spoke to one who said, "Oh, I'm the youngster. I'm 98." He was fabulous, and he went in the first wave. And I spoke to another one who went in on a parachute in about wave 3. And I remember saying to the parachutist, who was 99, "God, you were brave." He said, "No, I was just very young. I was 18.
Not scared.
And stupid."
Yeah.
And I did as I was told.
Yes.
But I held his hand and said, "Come on, what you did was extraordinary." And I think it is extraordinary because there are so few of them left now. And in Portsmouth today, there's great events going on. But I think it's also fabulous. Our own king is going to lead the world's commemoration tomorrow in Normandy. Princess Anne is there today. And it's fantastic the king's there because that's also a sign that he's battling on as well with his health.
Do you think that today's generation of 19-year-olds, 18-year-olds, understand what happened?
There was that survey recently which showed a lot of teenagers don't even know what D-Day is or what it means.
Yeah,
which
a
is
lot of
extraordinary.
teenagers think that if you wear a poppy, it's because you support war.
Yeah.
Not because because you're commemorating those who
The
died
fallen,
for your right, really, to
I think
protest, to say what you think.
We
to
know
be
so
free.
little about our British history in our schools. I think part of the school curriculum they should be made to go to the war graves. In
Well,
Normandy,
a lot of them do actually. A
which
lot
is really
of them
important.
do. But I think
Because it's incredibly moving when you
Yes.
see their ages.
Yes, that's the thing. 17, 18, 19.
17. Some of them probably died before they even got out of the craft
Absolutely.
carrying them through the water.
And of course, there's a sort of kind of parallel with the sort of going back to politics with Sunak's idea of national service, which I know has been sort of pilloried, but I actually think it's a really good idea, mainly because I have a 19-year-old son and I quite like somebody to knock some sense into him.
Yeah. Well, you could try.
I've tried very hard
And failed.
not succeeding.
Yeah.
But I think, I think there comes a point where I think national service is a sort of constant reminder of what it takes to do what those men did.
Yeah, we shouldn't forget the women too, because
No, let's not. No, I'm not forgetting the women, but I'm just sort of saying
there were nurses on those
yeah.
ships going in with them, and some of them died, and of course all the women involved in the code breaking at Bletchley Park. I think I hope that your kids are going to be glued to it tomorrow. Watching it, because they should be, because we owe them so much.
But this is the thing about national service, is that what people forget is that peace is a very rare and precious thing, actually, in the history of mankind. And it has to be protected. You have to be prepared to stand up and defend it. And all these people who pillory the idea of national service, like Polly Toynbee and saying,
Guardian.
"Oh, it's out of it's buffed and tuffed and it's ridiculous and it's old-fashioned." No, if people do national service, they will understand. They will have some concept of what these men and women went through in order to protect us and to keep us safe and to keep us free. They should, at the end of it, be thankful that they're not having to do it.
Oh, no.
But the fact that they know what it actually entails, that they know what it feels like to have to hold a gun and to have to think about killing another human, which I just, that for me would be very difficult to deal with.
And I guess for a lot of young people, they'll think about the wars that our governments have got us into. Blair took us into that wretched war in Iraq in 2003. Cameron sending the military, and we sent the military into Afghanistan. Faraway countries, conflicts with aims that our young people think, really, why are we doing that? Men coming back, women coming back with either in body bags or they've lost limbs. They don't get it. But if there was a direct threat to British shores from a fascist regime like the Nazis, I hope that they would see it differently. We should make them watch some of the war films.
Well, I know, but also I think...
Put them on the curriculum.
But I think also that war is trivialised because most of them play Call of Duty and they think it's a computer game.
Yeah.
And they don't see that,
You should see The Longest Day, Saving Private Ryan.
It is extraordinary. Yes, Saving Private Ryan, one of the best films.
Amazing.
I mean,
so
amazing.
Moving.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
moving. And if you made them watch it as part of the school curriculum,
Yeah.
why not?
And
then
also
have a
to
discussion.
understand that you can be a pacifist and have a role
You can.
in a conflict.
You can.
In working for the ambulance service or all of these things. And just understanding the nature of war and why people have to fight to defend their freedom or to defend their rights. I just think that a lot of young people today don't understand it because, what is it? I mean, my generation has never really experienced war. My parents' generation. So we're four generations away from it.
I suppose we had the Falklands War, but again, that was 8,000
miles away.
It was a long way
away. No, nobody felt it at home.
We were never going to get an Exocet missile landing in Lewisham.
No, there was no blitz. There were no bombs landing in the UK.
My mum and dad. My dad lived in London during the Blitz, and my mum was evacuated, and they never talked about it much. But I just remember my mum saying once, "You kids just don't get it.
No.
If you live through the Blitz, if you live through rationing, if you live through getting up one day and the house next door has gone." And my mum's cousin was buried in his house for 3 days, and then he was in hospital for 3 months.
Yeah.
And at the end of the 3 months, they told him his mum hadn't come out of the wreckage of that house. And I only found that story out about 10 years ago. I said to my mother, "Why did you never tell me?" She said, "It was because that's what we grew up with."
Yes.
That's what they grew up with, and you didn't make a fuss.
I mean, my grandfather was a Chindit, which was terrifying. And he went off and he came back a completely different man.
You should explain what a Chindit is.
No, you explain it because I'm not very good at it.
Well, they fought in the Far East.
They fought in the Far East.
Which was the Forgotten War.
Which was the Forgotten War. It was sort of, it was not the war in Europe, and therefore, but it was very brutal and very scary, and it was Japanese, and it was Singapore. It was those places, and it was very alien, because they were alien places anyway, and then they were and he came back and basically drank himself to death.
How sad.
It took him about 40 years because he was a big, strong man, but that's basically what happened.
But the worry is when these old boys are no longer with us, and they can't be with us for much longer. Do the D-Day occasions, are they less?
Well, I think they are, but I think I get very angry when I see the cenotaph defaced by protesters and people like that, because I just that's what I'm talking about really. That's that sort of absolute
lack of respect,
incomprehension for what these people did, and I think we need to have a plan to make sure their memory stays alive.
Yeah, and people should go to the Arboretum, the War Memorial at the Arboretum, which is very beautiful, very moving. And,
I mean, social media is the way forward to do that.
Yeah.
Videos and clips and films and stuff like that, because young people do understand that and they interact very well with it. I mean, the Holocaust Memorial Society, is it, or I can't remember? But they do a lot of social media stuff, which is very, very effective.
Yeah, and we should. And I cannot, when it's in the run up to Remembrance Sunday, I don't know how many poppies I'd buy, because if I see an older person rattling that tin, I just have to.
Yes.
And I probably 50 poppies.
Well, I lose them the second I buy them. I don't know where they go.
I know.
But anyway, I just think we should mark it.
Yeah.
As a
very special
one.
Very special, especially because I think there's going to be 20 veterans from D-Day there on the Normandy beaches tomorrow, and I think God love all of them because they won't be with us for much longer, and they're great men and so modest.
Yes.
What's all the fuss about, said one of them. What you making all this fuss for? I said, because I think you deserve it.
Yes, absolutely.
I think you really deserve to be made a fuss of.
Absolutely. And to have survived all that time.
Yeah.
To survive the initial invasion.
I mean, still have that incredible clear memory. The terror, Sarah. You rush into the sea and there are people literally dying in front of you, your mates you might have signed up with. And of course some of them were too young anyway. They were only 16. They were supposed to be 17 or 18. Yeah.
Anyway.
That's it. D-Day.
Young people, learn your history.
Yes. Schools, teach more British history and get Saving Private Ryan on the curriculum.
I mean, we have a whole month in schools for Black History Month.
Of course we do.
We should definitely have a sort of, memorial month for veterans.
Yeah, I agree with you.
We're not sure if the Labour Party will be up for that when they get elected. Anyway, thank you very much for listening or watching The Reaction. We will be back next week, no doubt, with more election gossip.
Yes,
from Andrew. What was it Richard Tice called you today?
He called me an irritating. Well, I'm often called irritated. I don't mind that. Called
a tittle-tattle gossip columnist.
Gossip columnist, and I take that as a great badge of honour. And I said, "Thank you very much, Mr. Times. You carry on if you want to. I'm going to carry on writing what I want to. Thank you very much." And I did introduce him as. I said, "This is Richard Tice, who was deposed as leader of the Reform Party and is now the chairman of the party." He said, "Was that agreed by the membership, or was that little deal stitched up with Nigel Farage, who owns the Reform Party?" He does, because he's got a 53% shareholding, just so you know.
So there you have it. Andrew Pearce winning, making friends everywhere and influencing people.
And not minding when people are rude to me, because they often
can't in this
are.
job. No, you can't in this business.
No.
But anyway, thank you very much.
Lovely to be here. See you next week.